The Jaguars are going to have to do something they haven't done a lot, and that is hit on guys late in the draft. I'll tell you who they should go after and why I don't think Trent's going to do it. In this version of Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for joining me, Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. We can also be your first watch. If you go to YouTube, our YouTube page that is Locked On Jaguars is available to you for free. All you got to do is hit the like button, subscribe, hit that bell so you receive notifications each and every time we drop an episode. And wherever you listen to your audio podcast, make sure you tap into that location as well so that you can make sure you don't miss an episode of Locked On Jaguars. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150. If your bet wins, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I want to start by saying what up to the everydayers. Thank you for joining us every day. You can be one too. Is all you got to do is come back and join us every single day, right? That easy. All right, got a good one for you today. We're going to talk about sleepers, guys that are, I call it my little board. I ain't going to call it my little board anymore because it might be offensive to some people, but the pre-combine big board went up. I did that already. I named my top 32 players. That's fluid. I love the fact that when people say fluid, they mean it's going to change. It can change, and it probably will, because I'll do one for the post-combine as well to see who stayed in that top 32 or who relinquished their spot or whatever. But today we're talking about guys. Now, this is a big list, so I didn't go full big board because it's actually going to change. I think eventually I may do a top 100 once I get settled right before the draft, but too many things are moving around right now for me to even think about that being an option. But I did come up with 10 names, 10 Jaguars-centric names of guys that I hope that they ought to be able to take a look at to create a situation where they get some depth and that they can have guys that can actually contribute that are late day 2 and early or day 3 guys, period. Some of these guys on the list, they aren't going to get there. What it is they won't be there when these teams pick. But as of right now, based on where they're ranked, these are guys that I think have a chance to get up and make some noise for themselves. And upon further review, it would not surprise me if some of these guys actually went on day 2 because I'm probably not the only one that feels about them the way that I do. First segment, the rest of the first segment, we'll talk about can Trent Baalke, the GM for the Jags, identify late talent. The second segment, 10 names to watch. That's where I'm getting the name of these players. And I'm going to tell you why finding gems, especially at the positions that I'm giving you, why finding those gems matter. Let me start by saying this. Nobody hits on every draft pick. I don't care who the best GM you've ever seen. We can go through history and we can talk about Bill Walsh. We can talk about Jimmy Johnson. We can talk about Ron Wolf. Those are the 3 names, in my opinion, that sort of are 3 of the 4 names that are on like the Mount Rushmore of talent evaluation. Bobby Beathard is probably there too, although he was at a little bit of a different time, but he found some gems in the draft. Went all the way to Texas A&I in the first round and got Darrell Green. You see how that worked out. He's another really, really good one. And then the 3-headed monster of Tom Landry, Tex Schramm, and the late Gil Brandt. I think all of those guys may have. Let me stop. I don't know, but I know we lost Gil just last year because Gil used to talk to me on social media. So those guys are probably there too, the way they built the Cowboys for probably 30 years. So nobody hits on all of the talent, but you can't miss all the time, right? And if you get to the point where you look at Trent Baalke's career, and you could probably name 5 or 6 guys that were late round picks that he hit on, that's not good enough, because you get 5 late round picks damn near every year. They had 13 last year. Antonio Johnson is so far is the only one that was able to make some noise, although I do hold out hope for young Mr. Abdullah to be able to make some noise if he's given the opportunity, whether that's here or somewhere else. Why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult? I think it's overthought by a lot of people. Everybody wants to look smart and seem like the smartest guy in the room. And to be honest with me, to be honest with you, I just think I wish people would take ego out of it. But guys want to be smart. They want to find. That's one of the criticisms about Bobby Beathard late in his career. He got so used to finding gems, it seems like that's all he did, and he ignored the obvious players that were right in his face from big schools. I do believe that Trent Baalke is just not a very good evaluator of talent. So I'll tell you right now, our show for Friday is going to be me telling you that I don't think he's ever going to. I'll tell you why I don't think he's ever going to win a championship being the general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's what I want to tell you. And I said what I was going to do for most of the offseason was, okay, he's here, so I got to just give you as much optimism as I can. But as we continue to get deeper and deeper into naming players, talking about talent evaluation, the more and more I realize that a lot of stuff that I feel, and he doesn't have to listen to me, but anybody, he ain't doing it. It's hard for me to figure out what he's going to do, because what he's going to do has been so atrocious, in my opinion, that it just makes it very, very difficult for me to even have it's like me when I'm at the barbershop, right? Somebody says, I want my haircut. I'm like, man, you're asking me to cut a bad haircut. If you ask me to cut a disconnected haircut with no blending, I'm like, bro, you may want it cut like that and I'll do it. But I'm telling you, just don't tell people that I did it, because they're going to think that it was me and not you. Well, that's what this reminds me of. Trent Baalke, I don't know how to cut a bad haircut without at least letting somebody else walk me through it. So I don't know how to make bad draft picks. Even when I'm going with the way that Trent has always done things, I don't know how to make bad draft picks. Even when I'm doing it in make-believe. I have tried over and over and over again to figure out his ways, his thought process. And I'm perplexed. And there's nothing wrong with being perplexed for not knowing what somebody else would do. But that's when somebody's a winner. Like when somebody does bad stuff, I think the best thing for me to do is just close my eyes and just go there. Because to me, that's what's going to happen. And I know there's a lot of people out there that will call me Negative Nancy or Debbie Downer or whatever. Shout out to Nancy's and Debbie's. But my thing is you got to get out your feelings, man. You got to get out your feelings. I really, 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 I have talked to people, and this is my attitude about this right now, is because not long ago I had a phone call with somebody, and now I'm not optimistic at all about Trent Baalke and his prospects of landing players that's going to be able to help this team. But just for this sake, I'm going to play GM today, and I'm going to name some guys, and then you guys can go watch them. Don't just watch the highlight tapes. Go watch all of the tape if you can find game film or whatever, and see for yourself why I like certain people. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to get right into that, and I'm going to name 10 players and tell you why I like them. 10 players I'm gonna name for you and tell you, and I'm going to warn you right now, 5 of them play the same position, and that's cornerback. So get ready for me to name those guys that I believe can help the Jaguars football team if picked by Trent Baalke. Now, you ain't going to get all 5 of these DBs, but just get one. So I'm naming them all because these are the guys that I think is a very deep DB class. And I'll get to all of that here in segment 2 in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. Got to let y'all know about today's sponsor, which is BetterHelp. Yep, BetterHelp, man. I have told you guys about it before. There have been times I needed some therapy. needed some help. The first thing I had to do was admit that therapy was going to work, right? And when you run out of other options, you just are very, very optimistic that it is going to help. It helped me. I'm telling you. Went through divorce, had some loss of life in my family, even had a friend of mine who died. And at some point, I got bogged down wondering why and how was I ever going to get back to just being me and living an everyday life. There's no embarrassment with you saying that you need help coping with things. All the macho stuff goes out of the window. And one place you can do that is BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try, man. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon, and you're going to get 10% off your first month if you are ready to give therapy a try. Second segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. And we always thank you for making us your first listen. Make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. It has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel we have, by the way, on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, we're going to get to naming some players. I'm going to tell you where they play, and I'm going to tell you why I like them. This is no specific order. This is not where I think they're going to be picked, but this is when the Jaguars start looking at their third-round compensatory pick that we anticipate they're going to get, and the fourth-round picks and choices that they may have, and even in the fifth round, some of these guys are going to be there. If you don't think they're going to be there, just imagine this. You probably didn't think Antonio Johnson was going to be there in the fifth round last year, but he wasn't. A little insight on that. I got a buddy of mine who was on staff at Texas A&M, told me that he got a call from the Jaguars and said, "What's wrong with him? Why is he still there?" And he was like, "I don't know, but you better hurry up and pick him because the Giants are about to do it." And the Jaguars took him with the next selection. So a little bit behind the veil, the Jaguars thought something must have been wrong with him because he was still there. A lot of people anticipated he was going to go late in the second or early in the third round. But for the Jaguars, they hit on something. He looks like a good special teams player. Looks like a guy who is a real good candidate for the big nickel. And he can play in the slot. And maybe we'll get a chance to even start or compete for a starting position this season. So let's just hope that they're able to find someone, or let me stop using find. Let's hope that they can identify the players and be able to target those players. I told you that 5 of these guys are corners. I'm going to name them last, right? The first guy is Javon Baker, a wide receiver from UCF, a former 4-star recruit that went to Alabama, left. A little bit older because I think he was in the class like with Jalen Waddle and all of those guys. But Javon Baker can play. Javon Baker can separate. Javon Baker is, even though he's listed at 6'1", is a guy who he looks different when the ball is in the air, right? He just looks like a dog, a football player. He looks like Antonio Brown light to me. And I say Antonio Brown light because Antonio Brown, in my opinion, is one of the best wide receivers I've ever seen. One of the 10 best wide receivers I've ever seen. And anybody, we can talk about off the field antics all we want to, but on the field, you cannot deny what he was all about. Let's just say that they also, that what they said in their pressers, you believe it. Like Luke Fortner's a good player, right? That's what they were saying. If I listen to Twitter and if I listen to myself, I think Luke Fortner is not a very good player who needs to get stronger. And it's not personal, but what it is I just think Luke Fortner struggles a little bit. So they still may not. They may be stubborn and they may not address it in free agency. They may not address it in the first 3 rounds of the draft either. There's a guy named Bo Limmer out of Wisconsin that's a really, really good player. That's a name that I've heard a lot. I doubt if he's here at this point because I think there's going to be a run on these interior offensive linemen. But that's a name that if they don't address it earlier with JPJ or Frazier or anybody like that or even Cedric Van Pran, that Bo Limmer might be an option and is a player that I believe is worth targeting. I really, really like. First of all, any offensive lineman from Wisconsin, you're going to get a look from me. But from what I've seen, he's a really good player, really at the point of attack. Usually when you get guys like that at this spot, what it is with them is, by the way, there's something wrong with every player. There's no perfect prospect. But normally this is worth a look-see, but usually athletically they lack a little bit of something that you like to call him a guaranteed starter. But at any event, he's going to be able to give you some depth, even give you some help. With the way he's built too, I'm thinking that maybe they can try him at guard a little bit, but we'll have to see about that. The next one is defensive tackle Justin Ebogbe. Now, I think it's Ebogbe or it may be Ebogbe, but he's from Alabama. Big kid. One of those tweeners. So there's some guys like him. I think Gabe Hall is one of those dudes. There's some dudes that they have that Malik Jackson type body, that 6'5", 290, 295 pound type body. He's a real active player, real good, real active player. Can play, I believe, I think he can two gap. I think he can play 5 technique, maybe even give you a little bit of 3 technique. He's not a nose guard and he's not an edge rusher. But just another active body, I believe they can get in your rotation and really, really help you if you're a football team. Cedric Johnson is another kid. He's an edge out of Ole Miss. I'm not going to lie. I really looked at Cedric Johnson because I remember when I liked Sam Williams, and I never told anybody who came from Ole Miss. It was probably about the same size, and Sam Williams plays with Dallas. I never said anything. And I kind of watched the tape, and I thought Cedric Johnson sort of looked a little bit like Sam Williams. He might not be as twitched up as Sam Williams, but I do believe at some point the Jaguars have to really, really start investing in these edge rushers that need a little bit of development, but that are not like Kayvon Chason where they can get pushed around. Good competition in the Southeastern Conference, pretty good production also. So I think Cedric Johnson is a guy that is more than worthy of being looked at. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, my 5th guy that's not a cornerback is my man Ray Davis, who I've heard some people call Little Frank Gore, right? And I don't call him Little Frank Gore because there's actually a Little Frank Gore in the draft. His name is Frank Gore Jr. But I will say that Ray Davis kind of does play that way. If you go back and watch the tape, shout out to Ray Davis where he ran all over the Florida Gators. And I'm not saying that because I'm not trolling the Florida Gators, but I guess I am because I said shout out to Ray Davis. But he looked like he was instinctive. He was tough. He was physical. And I'm sitting there looking at it, man, they're letting this little 5'10", 202-pound running back kill him. Well, it turns out that kid is close to 228, maybe a little bit tad under 230. So Ray Davis has a lot of size that could actually help. And we're talking about a dude that's going to be maybe a 2 or 3 running back 3 that can really, really help, that is instinctive, that knows how to get short yardage, and has a little bit of he got a little giddy up in him now. He ain't going to burn nobody on a track, but he can get away a little bit. He's probably faster than James Robinson was a couple of years ago here. So that's a good football player. So they really named these 5 corners because they're not going to get them all, but they all, to me, these guys have something in common. So if the Jaguars are going to play more man, if they're going to, whether it's zone or if they're going to press more, whether it's zone or man, they need guys that have attitude. This dude I fully do not expect to be on the board when the Jaguars start to pick, maybe even late in round 3, but that's Renardo Green, who I watched at Florida State. All I want to do is tell you this. If you love Malik Neighbors, who I love to death, I want you to go back and watch the season opener between Florida State and LSU and just watch what Renardo Green did to Malik Neighbors. That's it. And I'm going to tell you this. He did it all year, and then he went to the East-West. I think he went to the Shrine Bowl and did the same thing. Max Melton from Rutgers. Love DBs that are coached by Greg Schiano. That's one thing. 2, love the fact that he can play nickel. 3, love the fact that he's scrappy. So that's Max Melton, who I like. I got 3 more corners to name, but I'm going to save them for the top of segment 3. I'm going to save those names for the top of segment 3, and then I'm going to tell you why finding these gems matters. We're going to do all of that here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. But first, I got to let you know about FanDuel, man, the title sponsor of today's show. And guess what? It is also something I have told you all about for a long time. Now, don't let the excuse of the fact that football season being gone prevent you and stop you from getting your money. Because right now, with FanDuel, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. It's all about the NBA, man. It's Thursday, going to kick back off after All-Star weekend, and guys will have something to prove. Hopefully there's no load management because they just had load management with a little bit of an extended period off. Bet on all your NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and shoot your shot. Say it again, FanDuel.com/locked-on and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. And as I always say, we always thank you for making us your first listen. I have a few more names to name of the 10 players that I want to watch. And 3 of them are corners, right? 3 of them are corners. I named Ronaldo Green. I named Max Melton in no specific order. There's a kid at Wake Forest named Kalen Carson I really like. The reason why I like Kalen Carson is because he tackles everything, right? And we heard Ryan Nielsen talk about the need to be able to tackle and hit people. And so I'm looking at corners that know how to tackle in space. I'm looking at corners that have decent size, that have the lateral quickness, because since they're giving up nothing cheap, that means they're going to put a lot of pressure. They're going to mix it up front. So I don't think guys have a whole lot of time that they're going to have to cover. But if you do, I believe you need guys that are athletic. And then the other thing is, how many times did you see a player catch the ball on like a 2nd and 7? They have them dead to right. After a 4-yard reception, somebody misses a tackle and the dude gets 7.5 yards and extends the drive early and doesn't allow the Jaguars to even get in any kind of sub package. So I think Kalen Carson fits that bill. This next one is a real good favorite of mine. And that's Josh Newton out of TCU. He's feisty, man. Some people say he's going to be a little grabby. I heard somebody talk about his hands. They say he can be a little grabby. I think Josh Newton is the real deal. May not be as big as you like, probably a little bit bigger than Darius Williams, but very, very similar in the way that he plays to Darius Williams, although it's not as refined and not as polished. But I also believe that a cat that comes from the Big Ten that is always on that island is going to have an opportunity in the league to make some plays once you coach a little bit of that handsy stuff out of him, that grabby stuff out of him. Last but not least, another kid that I'm very, very familiar with because I covered the team that he plays along with Ronaldo Green, and that is Jarian Jones. Jarian Jones is a nickel playing somebody, and he is not your typical nickel because he's over 6 feet tall, maybe 6 feet and a half, almost 6'1", and he's physical and strong, and he's a really, really good tackler, and he plays with a chip on his shoulder. The dude was hurt for like two years and played through injuries, and then once he came back totally healthy this year, was a different player, and I don't think Florida State goes 13-0 without him. I think he is just that good, a really good football player, and is going to be a 10-year pro playing inside in the slot for somebody. So you talk about a slot guy, people think that he's a little guy. This dude is big and he's physical. He's bigger than most of the Jaguar corners now, with the exception he's probably about the same size as Tyson Campbell, to be honest with you. So yeah, those are the 10 I'll name again. Wide receiver Javon Baker from UCF, cornerback Ronaldo Green, cornerback Max Melton, center Bo Limmer, defensive tackle Justin Eboigbe, cornerback Kalen Carson, cornerback Josh Newton, cornerback Jarian Jones, defensive end Cedric Johnson, the edge Cedric Johnson, and running back Ray Davis. Those are dudes that I have kind of identified with by looking at some of the film and some of the tape for the last 4 or 5 months. and then I kept coming back to them when it was time for me to put them in mock drafts, I would actually, instead of just going through the list, I just hit search, and sure enough, the names will pop up. I say, yep, I saw him and I like them. Bang. How's that go? How does this affect the Jaguars early? Well, the depth of the cornerback position, of course, is something else. I think I got 5 or 6 corners going in the first round. Yeah, I got that many going in the first round. Lord knows how many I have going in the second and third round. Some of these dudes may not be there. In fact, if I had to guess, Bernardo Green is the first dude I'm going to tell you that I don't think is going to be around when it comes time for them to pick. I think somebody's going to be smart about taking Jarian Jones also and Javon Baker. If I had to guess, I would say that those, maybe even Max Melton too. So let me add him in there. If I had to say, I'd say those are the 4 guys that wouldn't be available for Jacksonville because somebody is really, really smart and they're going to take those dudes. But right now, according to the list, these are 4 guys that I think are way better than the list. And this is pre-combine. A lot, it's fluid, remember? A lot depends on what happens at the combine and how well these guys play at the combine. Now, why is it so important that you find these gems and that you find them late? Rookies, by definition, are guys, or by just what you know about the game, are guys that you don't have to pay as much for. If you can get rookies that can contribute early, and then they are guys that you believe you can build your team with long term, you get them early for next to nothing. Some of these dudes won't even be making $1 million, right? If you can get production out of a guy making $1 million for 4 years, that somebody else is getting the production from a guy making $7 or $8 million, that means you can allocate those funds to other places on the team, teams that may need guys because of injuries, positions where you may need guys because of injuries. You may need to just, maybe you swung and missed. This is what helps the misses even better, when you can get guys that you can pay, that you target and find them in the right spot, and you can get them and pay them less money. That's important. 2, you just don't want to be going into free agency, which is like the transfer portal, every single year to help you out and get starters. You want homegrown guys. You want developable football players that you can eventually turn into long-term guys. And the quicker you identify that they can help you, the quicker you can offer them an extension, maybe a year before they're supposed to get it, and you can get them at a little bit less. That's what they, in my opinion, they should have done that with Josh Allen. I think they should have signed Josh Allen at some point before he got to the point where they either now have to tag him for $22 million or sign him to a long-term deal, which it seems like they're hesitant to do over 4 or 5 years. The way that you avoid that, if you got a good football player, is you extend them a year early. Like with these dudes, I think first round picks, there's always the 5th year option. Everybody else, it's either 3 or 4 years, depending on, where. I think day 2 guys, I think second round guys may be 4 years as well, probably third round guys. But at some point, you're going to get these dudes that's going to sign these 3-year deals. And you need to be able to make sure that you can keep them in the house. Ultimately, what you want is people that can help you be better. That's why I said stop being hung up on one position and realize that the Jaguars just draft dudes that can play, even if their team isn't a complete team. And it's very, very difficult to find a team that's complete. So let me give you a Whiggism here. A Whiggism says, I'd rather have a team full of good players than be complete with a team full of average guys, right? Give me a team full of good players, with even if they stack up on top of each other at positions, and I'll lead with what I lead with, their talent, and I'll rotate them. I'll do whatever I have to do. But I think that's better because you have a higher ceiling and a higher probability that they're going to be able to make things happen than if you draft a bunch of dudes that aren't good, but they made you feel complete because all your squares were filled in. So that's something that I think we ought to acknowledge, ought to look at, and ought to keep an eye on. Hold my hand to the fire and tell me how these dudes do at the combine, and tell me also whether or not I missed anything. Feel free to comment down in the comment section on YouTube, and make sure you tap into Locked On Jaguars every single day, because it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. Don't forget to make Locked On Sports Today the first 24 streaming channel on YouTube your second listen of the day. You can also catch it on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today uses local experts like myself and some of our national shows, and we cover every single league and every single angle of everything. All right, man. Y'all take care until the next time. Take care of each other more than anything. We'll see you next time here on Locked On Jaguars.